The sun blazed mercilessly over the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory in 1875, casting long shadows across the parched earth, as Sophia Lawson collapsed at the edge of the cattle trail, her trembling fingers clutching an empty canteen. 3 days without proper food had left her weak, her once vibrant blue dress now tattered and coated with the red dust of her desperate journey west. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself, though her body refused to comply with her desperate wishes. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered in her fading consciousness. Thomas Adler pulled back on the reins of his chestnut mare, dust swirling around them as he spotted the crumpled figure by the trail. He'd been driving a small herd of cattle back to his ranch when the unusual sight caught his attention. Adjusting his worn leather hat to better shield his eyes from the relentless sun, he dismounted with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent most of his 26 years in the saddle. "Miss," he called, approaching cautiously. "You all right there?" Sophia's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his deep voice, her vision blurred as she tried to focus on the tall figure now kneeling beside her. "Water," she managed to rasp, her throat painfully dry. Without hesitation, Thomas uncorked his canteen and gently lifted it to her cracked lips. "Slow sips now," he cautioned, supporting her head with his calloused hand. "Too much at once will make you sick." The cool liquid brought immediate relief, and as her vision cleared, Sophia found herself looking into the kindest pair of hazel eyes she'd ever seen, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. His expression reflected genuine concern beneath the shadow of his hat. "Thank you," she whispered once she'd taken several careful sips. She tried to stand but swayed dangerously. "I need to find work. I've come from Boston to start again." Thomas steadied her with a gentle hand. "You're in no condition to be looking for work right now, miss." "I must," Sophia insisted, her voice breaking. "I'm nearly out of money and I haven't eaten properly in days." "I'm too weak to work," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. The admission cost her dearly. She'd always prided herself on her independence. The cowboy studied her for a long moment, noting the quality of her worn clothes and the refined way she spoke despite her desperate condition. This was no ordinary drifter. "Rest beside me," Thomas answered, his voice gentle but firm. "My ranch is just a few miles ahead. You can recover there, get your strength back before deciding what's next." Sophia hesitated, years of propriety warring with her dire circumstances. "I couldn't possibly impose, it's no imposition," he interrupted, already helping her to her feet. "I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, who will be glad for the company, and I can't in good conscience leave you here to die in the sun." Too exhausted to argue further, Sophia nodded weakly. With surprising gentleness for such a rugged man, Thomas lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. She felt the solid warmth of his chest against her back as he reached around to take the reins. "I'm Thomas Adler," he said as they set off, his small herd of cattle falling into line behind them, guided by his well-trained cattle dog, Buck. "Sophia Lawson," she replied, fighting to stay conscious as the rhythmic motion of the horse threatened to lull her into sleep. "Thank you, Mr. Adler." "Call me Thomas," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Everyone does." The journey to Thomas's ranch passed in a haze for Sophia. She drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of his strong arms keeping her secure in the saddle. When they finally arrived, she barely registered the modest but well-kept ranch house with its wide porch and sturdy corral before darkness claimed her completely. She awoke to the smell of beef stew and fresh bread. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was back in Boston, in her family's home before everything had fallen apart. Then reality rushed back as she took in the unfamiliar room with its simple furnishings: a pine dresser, a washstand with a ceramic basin, and the comfortable bed where she now lay. "Ah, you're awake," a plump, gray-haired woman bustled into the room carrying a tray. "Thomas said you'd be hungry when you came to. I'm Eliza Holloway, the housekeeper." Sophia tried to sit up, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm so sorry for the trouble." "Nonsense, child," Mrs. Holloway interrupted, setting the tray across Sophia's lap. "No trouble at all. This house could use a woman's touch besides my own. Now eat up before it gets cold." The stew was rich and hearty, the bread still warm from the oven. Sophia hadn't realized just how famished she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. She ate slowly, savoring each bite while Mrs. Holloway chatted cheerfully about the ranch and its operations. "Thomas has done well for himself," the older woman explained. "Started with almost nothing 5 years ago after coming west from Pennsylvania. Now he's got a respectable spread and about 60 head of cattle. Not the biggest ranch in the territory, but it's growing. He seems very kind," Sophia ventured. Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled. "That he is, though life out here hasn't been easy on him. Lost his parents young, then his wife Sarah 3 winters back to pneumonia." "Oh," Sophia's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "I didn't realize. He doesn't talk about it much," the housekeeper said with a sigh. "Keeps to himself mostly, except for business in town. Good man, though, one of the best." She patted Sophia's hand. "Now finish your meal and rest. We can talk more tomorrow." After Mrs. Holloway left, Sophia finished her meal and sank back against the pillows, her mind whirling with thoughts of the quiet cowboy who had saved her life. Outside her window, she could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the occasional shout from the ranch hands. It was a different world from the city streets of Boston she'd fled 3 weeks ago. The next morning, feeling considerably stronger, Sophia insisted on getting up. Mrs. Holloway provided a simple calico dress that was a bit large but clean and serviceable. "It belonged to my daughter," the woman explained. "She's married and living in Denver now." Sophia thanked her profusely, relieved to be out of her filthy travel clothes. After washing up and braiding her long chestnut hair, she made her way to the kitchen, determined to make herself useful. "I won't hear of it," Mrs. Holloway protested when Sophia offered to help with breakfast. "You're still recovering." "Please," Sophia insisted. "I need to earn my keep. I've always been a good cook, even if I haven't had to do it much these past years." Reluctantly, the housekeeper allowed her to help prepare biscuits while she fried up salt pork and eggs. Soon, delicious aromas filled the kitchen, and the ranch hands began filing in for their morning meal. Thomas was the last to arrive, and he stopped short in the doorway when he saw Sophia standing by the stove, a light flush coloring her cheeks as she set a plate of golden biscuits on the table. "Miss Lawson," he said, removing his hat, "you shouldn't be up yet." "I'm feeling much better, thanks to your hospitality," she replied, meeting his gaze. In the clear light of morning, she noticed flecks of gold in his hazel eyes and the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life yesterday." Thomas nodded, suddenly looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said softly, "not everyone would have." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had both known hardship. Then one of the ranch hands called for Thomas's attention, and the moment broke. Over the next few days, Sophia gradually regained her strength. Despite Mrs. Holloway's protests, she insisted on helping with household chores and even learned to gather eggs from the cranky hens in the chicken coop. Each small accomplishment gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. She saw little of Thomas during daylight hours. Spring was a busy time on a cattle ranch, with calves to brand and fences to mend after the harsh winter. But in the evenings, he would often sit on the porch, and Sophia found herself drawn to join him, watching the spectacular sunset paint the vast Wyoming sky in vibrant oranges and purples. Their conversations started hesitantly, with polite inquiries about her recovery, but gradually deepened as trust built between them. She learned about his struggles to establish the ranch after losing his Pennsylvania home to bank foreclosure, and how he'd named it Second Chance Ranch, because that's what it represented for him. In turn, Sophia slowly revealed pieces of her own story, how her father's shipping business had failed after his death, leaving her and her mother destitute. How her mother had died of grief and shame shortly after, and how the man Sophia had been engaged to marry had quickly withdrawn his proposal when her financial circumstances changed. "I came west because I had nowhere else to go," she admitted one evening, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I had just enough money for the train ticket and a little food. I thought I could find work as a teacher or shopkeeper in one of the growing towns." "What you did took courage," Thomas said quietly. "Starting over isn't easy." "Neither is saving a stranger on the brink of collapse," she replied with a small smile. Thomas shrugged, embarrassed by her praise. "I've been in dark places myself. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to extend a hand." As the days turned into weeks, Sophia became an increasingly integral part of ranch life. She took over much of the cooking from Mrs. Holloway, who gratefully focused on other household tasks. She organized Thomas's chaotic ledgers, discovering she had a talent for bookkeeping. And gradually, she noticed the way Thomas's eyes followed her movements, how he seemed to find more reasons to be near the house during the day. For his part, Thomas found himself thinking about Sophia at odd moments while mending fences during cattle drives, as he fell asleep at night. Her quiet strength and determination impressed him. She never complained about the hard work or primitive conditions, so different from her former life in Boston. Instead, she approached each new task with resolve, learning quickly and adapting to ranch life with unexpected grace. One afternoon in late May, a sudden spring storm caught them both by surprise. Thomas had taken Sophia to see a nearby meadow where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, a rare splash of color in the often harsh landscape. Dark clouds rolled in without warning, bringing sheets of rain and rumbling thunder. "There's an old line shack just over that rise," Thomas shouted over the downpour, pointing toward a low hill. "We can wait it out there." They ran, Sophia's skirts heavy with rain, until they reached the small one-room cabin. Thomas quickly lit the oil lamp kept there for emergencies, casting a warm glow over the rustic interior with its simple cot, table, and wood stove. Sophia stood shivering in her soaked clothes, trying not to let her teeth chatter. Without a word, Thomas kindled a fire in the small stove, then rummaged through a trunk and pulled out a worn blanket. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "You should get out of those wet things before you catch your death. I'll wait outside on the porch." "You're just as wet as I am," Sophia protested. "You'll catch pneumonia yourself." Thomas hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "It wouldn't be proper, turn your back," Sophia said practically, though her heart fluttered nervously. "We'll both change and wrap up in blankets. I won't look if you won't." A faint smile touched his lips, "As the lady wishes." They turned away from each other, the small space suddenly charged with awareness. Sophia quickly removed her sodden dress and petticoats, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself before removing her chemise and drawers beneath its shelter. She could hear the rustle of fabric as Thomas did the same, removing his wet shirt and trousers. "Decent?" he asked, his voice sounding strained. "Yes," she replied, turning to find him wrapped in another blanket, his broad shoulders and upper chest visible above its edge. His damp hair curled more prominently now, giving him a boyish appearance despite the day's growth of beard on his strong jaw. Sophia became acutely aware of her own state of undress beneath the blanket, and a blush spread across her cheeks. Thomas cleared his throat and gestured toward the stove. "We should hang these to dry," he said, carefully draping his wet clothes on the backs of chairs positioned near the heat. Sophia did the same, studiously avoiding looking at the masculine garments now hanging alongside her feminine ones. Outside, rain lashed against the small windows and thunder rumbled continuously. Inside, the tiny cabin grew warm from the stove and the presence of two people in close quarters. They sat side by side on the edge of the cot, the only seating available besides the chairs holding their clothes. A comfortable silence grew between them, punctuated by the drumming of rain on the roof. I should be leaving soon, Sophia said eventually, staring into the flames visible through the stove's grate. I've imposed on your hospitality far too long. Thomas turned to look at her, his expression suddenly intense. Is that what you want, to leave? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sophia met his gaze, seeing vulnerability there that matched her own. No, she admitted softly. It's not what I want. Then stay, he said simply, his hand finding hers atop the rough blanket. Stay, Sophia. The sound of her name on his lips sent a tremor through her. As what, Thomas? Your housekeeper? Your bookkeeper? As whatever you wish to be, he answered, his voice deepening. To me, you're already so much more. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin in stark white light for an instant. In that moment of clarity, Sophia saw the future she could have here, not an easy one, but one filled with purpose and companionship, perhaps even love. I came west looking for a new beginning, she whispered. I never expected to find it like this. Thomas's hand tightened around hers. Life rarely gives us what we expect. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned toward her. Sophia's heart pounded as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. She responded hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty, her free hand coming up to touch his face. When they finally parted, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. I haven't felt this way since Sarah, he confessed. Didn't think I ever would again. I've never felt this way at all, Sophia replied honestly. Not even with my former fiancé, what I felt for him was nothing like this. Thomas smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. Good. They talked through the afternoon as the storm gradually abated, sharing hopes and fears, dreams and disappointments. By the time their clothes had dried and they prepared to return to the ranch, something fundamental had shifted between them. The following weeks brought a new sweetness to life at Second Chance Ranch. Thomas found reasons to spend more time near the house, often bringing Sophia small gifts, a particularly beautiful wildflower, a book from his limited collection, a carved wooden box for her few possessions. For her part, Sophia blossomed under his attentions, gaining confidence in her new skills and her place on the ranch. Not everyone approved of their growing relationship. When they rode into town together for supplies, Sophia was acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. The respectable women of Pine Ridge regarded her with suspicion, a woman living unchaperoned at a bachelor's ranch, with only an elderly housekeeper as propriety's thin shield. Pay them no mind, Thomas told her after a particularly cutting remark from the banker's wife reached their ears. People will always talk. It's different for a man, Sophia replied, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Your reputation doesn't suffer the way a woman's does. Thomas frowned, considering her words. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, he took her hand in his. Does it matter very much to you what those town gossips think? Sophia sighed. It shouldn't, I suppose. After all, I left Boston partly to escape such judgments, but… She hesitated. I don't want to be the reason people think poorly of you or your ranch. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. There's a solution, he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion, if you'd consider it. Sophia's breath caught as he slid from the porch chair to one knee before her. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold band. It's not fancy, he said apologetically. It was my mother's, but I'd be honored if you'd wear it, Sophia, if you'd become my wife. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked from the ring to his earnest face. Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time. I've never been more certain of anything, Thomas replied, his eyes never leaving hers. I love you, Sophia Lawson. I think I started falling for you that first day when you were too proud to beg for help even though you were starving. I love you too, she whispered, the words coming easily because they were true. In the weeks since he'd found her by the trail, Thomas had become her anchor, her partner, her dearest friend. Yes, I'll marry you. His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but Sophia didn't care. She threw her arms around his neck, laughing through her tears as he stood, lifting her from the chair and spinning her around on the porch. Mrs. Holloway found them like that, breathless and laughing, and promptly burst into tears of happiness herself. "About time," she declared, wiping her eyes on her apron. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar to get things moving." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small white church in Pine Ridge. Despite the whispers that had followed them previously, many townsfolk attended. A bride was still a novelty in the Wyoming Territory, where women remained scarce. Sophia wore a new dress of pale blue silk. Thomas had insisted on ordering it from Denver despite her protests about the expense. Mrs. Holloway had fashioned a simple veil from netting and attached it to a crown of wildflowers. As she walked down the short aisle toward Thomas, who waited in his best black suit looking both terrified and elated, Sophia felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas's kiss was tender yet filled with promise, bringing a blush to Sophia's cheeks and good-natured cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward at the ranch was joyous, with music from a fiddle and harmonica, dancing in the yard, and enough food to feed twice their number. As evening fell and lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Sophia found a quiet moment with her new husband. "Happy?" Thomas asked, his arm around her waist as they stood slightly apart from their guests. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "When I collapsed on that trail, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning." Thomas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Second chances," he murmured. "That's what we both got." The early months of their marriage were not without challenges. Running a cattle ranch was demanding work, with dangers and setbacks that tested them both. A late summer drought threatened their hay crop, essential for winter feed. A mountain lion killed 3 calves before Thomas and his ranch hands could hunt it down. And Sophia still had much to learn about being a rancher's wife, skills her Boston upbringing hadn't prepared her for. But they faced each challenge together, growing stronger as a couple with each obstacle overcome. Thomas marveled at Sophia's resilience and quick thinking, while she admired his steady patience and unwavering determination. Their partnership deepened into a bond that sustained them through the difficult times and sweetened the good ones. By their first anniversary, Second Chance Ranch was thriving. Thomas had expanded their herd and added a small apple orchard that Sophia tended with care. The account books showed a modest profit, enough to hire another hand and make improvements to the house. Most precious of all was the new life growing within Sophia. As spring returned to the Wyoming plains, she and Thomas prepared for the birth of their first child. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter to me," Thomas insisted as they lay together one night, his hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. "Just healthy and strong like its mother." Sophia smiled in the darkness. "I'm hoping for a boy with your eyes and that stubborn jaw of yours." "God help us if the child inherits both our stubborn streaks," Thomas laughed, pulling her closer. Emma Elizabeth Adler arrived in late July, a healthy baby girl with a lusty cry and a tuft of dark hair. Thomas wept unashamedly when Mrs. Holloway placed his daughter in his arms for the first time, and Sophia's heart nearly burst with love for them both. "She's perfect," he whispered, carefully returning the swaddled infant to Sophia's embrace. "Just like her mother." Life settled into a new rhythm with Emma's arrival. The ranch continued to prosper, and their small family found joy in simple pleasures: Sunday picnics by the creek, evenings spent reading aloud while Emma played on a blanket nearby, the shared satisfaction of watching their hard work bear fruit. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Samuel Thomas, completing their family. The children grew strong and spirited in the fresh air and wide open spaces of the ranch, loved fiercely by both parents and doted on by Mrs. Holloway, who declared herself an honorary grandmother. As the years passed, Sophia sometimes thought back to that desperate day when she'd collapsed by the trail, too weak to continue. How close she had come to a very different fate. Instead, the starving girl from Boston had found not just survival but true happiness with the quiet cowboy who had told her simply, "Rest beside me." On their 10th anniversary, Thomas surprised her with a special gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of Emma and Samuel on one side, and on the other, an inscription. "Second chances brought me you. Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked that night as they sat on the porch swing, watching the same Wyoming sunset that had captivated her a decade earlier. "Stopping for a half-dead stranger that day?" Thomas smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with happiness rather than hardship now. "Best decision I ever made," he replied, drawing her close against his side. "Turns out I wasn't just saving you that day, you were saving me too." Sophia rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the familiar sounds of their ranch children's laughter from inside, where Mrs. Holloway was telling bedtime stories, cattle lowing in the distant pastures, the creak of the porch swing beneath them. This place that had once been so foreign to her was now home in every sense of the word. "We saved each other," she said softly, "and built something beautiful together." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed: strength in weakness, rest after weariness, love after loneliness. Their second chance had become a life beyond anything either could have imagined, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful journeys. And in the vast Wyoming Territory, where life was never easy but the rewards were rich for those with the courage to persevere, Second Chance Ranch stood as testament to the power of one simple act of kindness. A cowboy who had once told a starving girl, "Rest beside me,"